If you ain't first, you're last.
You think the FBI are the only ones on this guy?
The key to victory is anticipation.
If she were a president, she'd be Abraham Lincoln.
Fear is the path to the dark side.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
You are a sad, strange little man.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Top news stories of the week. Time to find out once again with Megan Olson and News of the Week on the Al Travis Show.
Love having her on the program. She's Megan's News and Review. Takes the top stories that are tweeted, retweeted, that sort of thing. Here in the state of Minnesota, we kick out sports. All we've been talking about is J.J. McCarthy. I'm tired of it. So I thank her for coming on the program. Can I hit you up on a story? You let me know if it's even on your top list, but I'd love to chat about it with you because I think it actually has huge implications in the news world in Minnesota, but it's not going to play that way. Can I throw one at you?
Absolutely.
Star and Trib yesterday comes out with a front page story about how possibly Democrats are not thrilled Walz is running for a third term. Might be a drag on the ticket. Here's my thought. You tell me how brilliant I am. Or not, but don't go not because I like you. The Star Trib will run, in my opinion, tackling the sports metaphor for Walz all day long. They're out there blocking and trying to protect him. For them to make a story out of nothing, out of a whole cloth, if you will, because no one was saying, what are the people saying of, and so they went out and found this article and made it, talked to Kupek, Senator Kupek we just had on, Senator Gustafson we'll have on in a week, to go out of their way to say, are you happy with him being on the ticket? Why would they write that article, Megan? This makes no sense to me unless there's really some uproar out there, some real fear.
I think this is kind of a tension that's been building. I mean, we know that Walz took kind of his sweet time with coming out and saying he's running for a third term. Granted, there were a lot of external issues happening, but he kind of took his sweet time. We've landed here now. We're hearing grumblings that he's struggling to find a running mate. Sounds like all the people he's asked so far have said no. I don't know how much of that is true, but I think it's just kind of this rising sentimentism that the Star Tribune truly just can't ignore, especially now when you have, outside of these articles, you have senators and representatives in his own party coming forward and saying, yeah, I'm not like super thrilled about it. I mean, you have kind of other rank and file and leadership members. Like I believe it's Aaron Murphy, leader Zach Stevenson, who are saying, we're fully confident, we want him at the top of the ticket, all that. But then you have others that are on the flip side saying like, well, if he's the nominee, cool, but we welcome maybe someone else. This kind of feeling that there could be a Democrat primary is something that has been building, and I think it would be wrong for the Star Tribune to ignore. So I'm pretty proud of them for coming out. I mean, it was like a soft dig at Walz. It wasn't as aggressive as I would have hoped, but
his campaign people called them. His campaign, they called and said, what in the HE double toothpicks are you doing putting this thing out there? Because this is why I say that about the Star Trib. So a week ago, I don't know if we talked about it or not, but the AUL, the auditor's office, legislative auditor came out and said that there were 12 issues with the governor, lieutenant governor's way of doing their books. Said there were no illegal stuff, but they got to fix this. This is horrible. And then all of a sudden it went away. Now, how is the Star Tribune, if this is what the auditor office comes out and says, how is it not the front page of the Star Tribune, a bullet point saying, boom, 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 these are the 12 little things. You decide if it's good or bad. Maybe you didn't take the trash out on Tuesdays, made a mess on Wednesday. I don't care, but you can decide whether you want to vote for it or not. They don't do an in-depth article on that. But here, they go out of the way to find Kupek and Moorhead and say, what do you think? Is this going to hurt you out there in the hinterlands?
And bringing him into this story, I think, is kind of part of the larger conversation of what they've been talking about. They did a poll earlier this summer, I believe in June, showing that 6 in 10 voters from outside of the Hennepin-Ramsey counties are disapproving of Walz. So bringing in Kupek, who's from Moorhead, greater Minnesota, it was really kind of a strategic, smart move on their part, I think, because Kupek said, I think he resonates really well with greater Minnesota, but he just hasn't spent a lot of time there. He hasn't spent a lot of time out in greater Minnesota with, my people, with others. He's obviously been tied up running for vice president of the United States and dealing with a bunch of other things, traveling to other states to speak at conferences because now he's been elevated to this level. But I think the reason why he won, 2 terms ago was in part due to Greater Minnesota, being from Greater Minnesota, having those relationships, being able to kind of bridge that Twin Cities and then rural Minnesota divide. That's kind of lacking now. And I think that's another key issue that might be overlooked for 2026. That could be really important. But you've got members calling for a primary now. And I don't know what other names we're going to see coming in.
Who on the Democratic
against Walz?
That's what I'm saying. Who on the Democratic side has got enough cojones and enough money and enough political clout to run against Walz, who every name recognition is 100% in Minnesota? To think you can overturn that on your own side would be very tough. But if somebody does, they do. But here's what I want to ask you. Can Walz survive this constant... you didn't have brothers, I don't think, growing up. My brother would sit on me and just tap my head like this until I did whatever in the heck he had to say, right? Walz is getting hit with the Chinese water torture, that thing that we did as kids, all day, every day. Today, Emmer's out. He's yelling and saying he wants a full-fledged investigation into where the money's going for feeding our futures to head back to Somalia, to Al-Shabaab or whatever it's, I don't care. And then the other one is, oh, wait a minute, the SNAP program in Minnesota literally came out, and they said they did not perform in 2020 or 2023 the required audits to their computer system. I don't know how he can continue to be pecked like this every time he turns the paper over. It's like, there's another chance.
Continue to be bothered by, what I think are very important issues and are going to be key in this next election. At the same time, doesn't really fully understand everything that's happening here in Minnesota, which is kind of crazy to say, but hear me out. He spoke at a conference in Texas, I believe, a couple of weeks ago and said, in his, I say knucklehead in quotes for the listeners, that's quotations, it's his own words. He calls himself a knucklehead. His own words, he said, we have universal pre-K in Minnesota. Like, things are going really well. That's not true. So you have, and that's kind of where I think some of this like building disdain for him is kind of coming from, because then you have Minnesota leaders saying, no, we've been trying to pass that and we couldn't. We only have, I think they passed another 5,000 pre-K free school spots this last session, but we still only have just over 12,000 spots in total. It's not universal pre-K. So he doesn't even understand the own kind of framework of the state of Minnesota and what I would say would be like the DFL wins over the past several years. So maybe it was just an error in what he said, but I don't think that helps either.
Well, it doesn't, but that's my point is that I actually saw that video of him saying that. I'm like, we have pre-K? I didn't know that, and we don't. But does that get played here? It's kind of like when he ran for VP, right? And all of a sudden the national news starts digging into the stuff like, was he ever in battle and did he carry a gun? All this stuff that he threw out starts coming out. I don't think a lot of people knew that he said that we have universal pre-K, even though we don't. It's like,
how important is it in the grand scheme of things? I don't know, probably not that important, but the fraud stuff surely is pretty important. And it really is on the candidates on the other side of the aisle and or third party PACs or other organizations, nonprofits coming out and, I don't know, doing an ad campaign or trying to spread that information and show that we're really in a tricky spot here. And if we want things to change, if we want Minnesota to go back to being our quiet, pristine state where we're not in the national headlines every other day, it seems, we kind of have to make a change.
Well, something's going to have to change. I just wonder, again, I keep calling this, just this water torture of stories coming out. Today, another guy said he was feeding 40,000 kids a week in Moorhead. He just pled guilty. I didn't even know there were 40,000 kids in Moorhead, but they were feeding them. So it's, again, how long can these stories continue to go? We are 1 year away. Will people get so bored and tired with them and trying to keep up with which is which, or are they just start turning a blind eye? That's going to be the story, I think, of the 2026 election. We got to go to break. You got something to hit us up with? What will we talk about on the other side?
Yeah, you mentioned it, but Minnesota fraud and the money here in Minnesota going to Al-Shabaab, the terrorist group. So that's a big one.
We'll talk about that next.
Think about it. Now that's
You need a friend at the Capitol who knows how to get things done.
And you're in luck, because that's exactly who we are, your friends at the Capitol, and we deliver results.
At Momentum Advocacy, we bring decades of experience in lobbying, public affairs, and crisis communications.
From local nonprofits to national corporations, we help you move policy, manage your media, and make your voice heard.
We're not just seasoned pros, we're essential partners.
Momentum Advocacy, your friends at the Capitol. Learn more at momentum-advocacy.com.
I'm hoping my audio is okay still, because I've got city workers in my backyard, Al, that are working on trees. Can't hear me.
Easily offended? The Al Travis Show is not for you. The Al Travis Show. All sides are welcome.
So happy to have her. Megan's News and Review. This story is interesting to me because I saw a bunch of little quick articles about this Al-Shabaab getting money from, Minnesota. And you're like, is that true? Is there something here? How are they going to prove that? But Tom Emmer, Representative Emmer, comes out and talks about it. If he's lying, it'd be the front page of the news. So there's some huge truth to this. Give us the story, Megan.
Yeah, it's a story that kind of just came out of nowhere. It was published in the City Journal with reporting from Chris Rufo and Ryan Thorpe. And it kind of just detailed a lot of the fraud here in Minnesota, primarily with Feeding Our Future, but also with the Medicaid housing stabilization services. They also mentioned the autism fraud that we've discussed at length here on the show, and talked about how these programs just absolutely swelled up in recent years. They're multiplying, some even 13,000% year over year, and showing how that money in Minnesota somehow made it back to Somalia, in which the means in which the money was wired and how it made it there was through I forget what they call them, but it's a certain type of group that Al-Qaeda linked Islamic terror group Al-Shabaab takes a cut from. So this is what they're alleging, is that the way in which some of this money was being routed back, which it's crazy to me to hear that the amount of money being routed back to Somalia is actually greater than like their GDP or their. I just looked it
up. I literally just looked it up by Google searches. Somalia receives about $1.3 billion in remittances. Well, that's how they get it there, which is more than their total humanitarian aid for the whole country. The remittances account for between 25 and 40% of their entire economy. Yeah. Everything they do, everything they produce, everything they do, up to 40% of that is being sent to them from countries like America. That is crazy.
And
You got to stop
it's
that.
Hawalas. That's the word I was looking
yeah.
for. So
Yeah.
they call them hawalas. So they're informal clan-based money traders that Al-Shabaab somehow has a relationship with and is able to kind of skim off the top. And what I should mention is this is not just reporting by some independent journalists. There are a number of law enforcement officials with the Joint Terrorism Task Force that came out in basically support of this, saying like, we have seen this throughout our tenure of service. And it's just
you think Trump's
story.
not jumping on this?
I immediately was like, there's no way this is true, but
I don't know what kind of paper trail they have, how they're ever going to show Al's dollar from here went to there. But that's their job. But you think Donald Trump's going to let that go? No. Minnesota's going to be front page of the national news for some time as they go after this.
And Donald Trump
That's
came
some crazy
out
stuff.
pretty strong right away. He came out almost immediately saying he's terminating the temporary protected status program for Somalis in Minnesota. Minnesota has the highest, I believe, we are the state with the biggest population of Somalis, with around 80,000 Somali Minnesotans that live here in our state. But what I think is interesting is everyone, Trump came out with this news and everyone, alarm bells, what does this mean? It's a pretty small program. It covers around just over 700 people, in the country, and just around 400 here in the state of Minnesota. So it wasn't as big of a program, at least, that I was expecting. But we have, leaders like Ilhan Omar, other members of the DFL here in Minnesota coming forward and speaking out against it, saying, Trump can't do this. I believe it's actually Secretary Noem who has the power to make the decision on this. Probably president's guidance,
and again, I get why she's yelling. It's in her district. These people vote for her. But I didn't hear her yelling when they did the exact same for Myanmar.
Yeah, they just did that this week too.
South Sudan last year, or Venezuela. No one complained that we're doing whatever to do their visa program for for the 400 that were there.
It's a program that's meant to protect people from deportations if their country is basically in shambles, or if there's a civil war, there's unrest. Is that the case with Somalia anymore? I mean, I'm actually not completely sure. I don't pay too much attention to international politics, but I think it's interesting now that, we have Trump coming in and saying, Minnesota, what you're doing is wrong, and basically calling out Walz and putting us in a timeout, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Well, it's a timeout because everybody reacting, right? All of a sudden we had a big gathering with Elon there talking about what, you can't do the yada yada, and it's for these 400 people. None of them have been booted out yet, but they're going to have to prove their case now. It isn't just automatically that you're not sent back. Okay, let's see where it goes. I didn't get too jazzed up about it until Emmer came out. And this is back to, I think Minnesota's going to be the front page of the national news. This drip, drip, drip on Tom Emmer from Tom Emmer and others on Walz is going to make this very, very tough.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then at the same time, too, I'm not sure if you saw this, and this was not in the story list I sent you, but there was a Hennepin County judge yesterday that tossed out the jury's guilty verdict relating to $7.2 million in a home healthcare fraud case. So jury comes forward after very minimal deliberation saying, oh, yeah, this for sure happened. There was fraud here. We are guilty conviction. Judge says, don't really agree with that. So I'm going to reverse it and lets the person off.
And I think this was the guy. I read the story somewhere today. $7.2 million. Running his business out of a post office box. Now, I don't know how much human help you can do. Was this the guy out of the post office box?
Yes, it was out of a mailbox. Yep, a Central Avenue mailbox. Yep.
So here's what drives... Megan, I go nuts here. I'm too old for this. I try to do everything right? Fill my taxes. Got to go through this whole thing to Obamacare. You got to send in your tax. You got to do this. I got to get tabs for my car. I got to do all this. It is hard to be a good guy in Minnesota. This knucklehead opens up a business, quote unquote, finger quotes, buys a $15 post office box and gets $7.2 million
and just starts billing Medicaid. And it's through the PCA system, which is really sad because that is a system that's meant for if you have a disabled child, if you have a child that requires, in-home health services, you're typically working within that system, or you're becoming PCA certified so that, you don't have to work and you can get paid to provide care. And then we have someone just billing Medicaid for patients that don't exist.
And my point is in a post office box. If we're going to I think when you send the first million to somebody, let's just pick a number, you got to drive by. Got to see if you could actually have somebody come into that building or whatever. Oh, it's just a post. How does that work? You know what I'm saying? There's got to be a minimum. I got to fly. I'm out of time. I appreciate you a ton. I mean, really, I'm up against hard break. Thank you, Megan. Always a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me on. We'll be back next week to talk about the top Minnesota news stories of the week with Megan's News and Review on the Al Travis Show.